The competitive advantage is what allows a company to produce goods or services better or more cheaply than its rivals. Now, you notice it is not always about price. You can have cheap, but you can have better. And you have people that are willing to pay more to get a better quality product. Think about Target versus Walmart, right? Yes, let's just use that. So Target versus Walmart, or even Dollar General, that type of thing. So people are willing to pay more money to get a better quality product. Just it's the trade-off, right? But you could also apply that to other things of clothing. You can apply it to furniture. You can apply it to food. You know, if you want to shop at Walmart groceries versus going to Whole Foods, or even, you know, some of the other stores. I'm a Publix person myself. And if you don't know what Publix is, I'm sorry, but I'm a Publix girl. So competitive advantage is very important, because if you do not have it, the ability for your company to survive in the long term is going to be challenging. But why is competitive advantage important? Well, because it gives your company the opportunity to make more sales. Now, that does not mean necessarily more products being turned out. It could be higher revenue for smaller volume, or it could be higher volume, smaller number per product. But the other piece of that, from the generating more sales, is that you also have, you could have superior margin per product. And that's from you're able to produce it more cheaply, but you still have a good markup on it. So that is all in how you've got some things set up, including your value chain, which we will get into in just a few minutes. But your competitive advantage does mean that you have to take risks and you have to pursue opportunities, which means you cannot always be focused on risk mitigations or risk reduction, whatever you want to call it. I go with mitigations typically, or avoiding risk. And so competitive advantage is going to be very challenging for those companies who have a risk-averse management or risk-averse board. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And even though this is enterprise risk management, you will have to take risks to have a competitive advantage. Now, there are different sources of competitive advantage. It's not just one. And so it could come from how you differentiate your products. There could be specific pieces around it. So whether one, you know, if I were to go with furniture, so I do like to buy furniture like from West Elm or something like that. Even Room and Board is actually a really interesting company to look at. All their stuff is handcrafted when you order it. So some of their they are able to differentiate their products. Along with that is a customer's willingness to pay for those products, right? So that is something that you do have to keep in mind. Now you've got so price discrimination comes from people being very, very picky about how much they're willing to pay for certain products. If you're able to bundle your pricing and your products and give them a discount if they bundle. Let's go with some insurance companies. You'll always hear like, bundle your home and auto policies and save money, versus companies that are only going to sell you one versus the other. And then human capital, based on how you source your people, how much you pay your people, that may give you a competitive advantage, because that's less cost of goods sold going into the product versus having high price. You know, for some companies, they are okay with having a higher price cost of goods sold because it means they get a higher quality, right? So it all depends on what you want to do. But how do you get an understanding of all of this? It's a great question. And that would come down to your value chain. So, what is your value chain? Think of it as, you almost want to call it a spider web of value, because sometimes it's what it kind of feels like. But it is all of the relationships between your suppliers, your customers, your employees, investors, where the business creates and captures economic value. That's a lot of words, but if you basically think of it as you've got a company that's creating a product or service, can it exist all by itself and survive? The answer is no. You have to have investors. You have to have employees. Otherwise, all you have is a shell company on paper. You have to have employees that actually do the work. You have to have suppliers that are providing you with things. Even if you're a service provider company, you still have third-party providers and suppliers. If you have an office, I'm willing to bet that you order office supplies. I'm willing to bet that you order furniture, that you maybe rent a building. Those are all suppliers for you. You may also use a recruiter. That's a supplier for you. So don't underestimate the suppliers piece of it. But the other output is, even if you have everything coming in on one side, and you have something going out, you have to have somebody willing to buy what's going out. So that would be your customer. So the whole piece of all of that is going to be your value chain. Now, there's a way to be able to analyze all of this. It may get a little messy, so just bear with me for a moment, okay? So with that, you have to look at a bunch of stuff. Okay. So you have to, excuse me, I'm going to take a sip of water real quick. I'll let you absorb the image that's on the screen while I drink. Okay, so you've got your primary activities. You have to understand how all of these pieces work within a process that creates value for an organization. So if you have 5 different products in your company, you have to do this analysis for each of those products. Do not think that you can do it at the company level, because it won't work, okay? You have to understand where the value is being created at each element in the chain so that you can maximize the value and reduce the cost. And all of that creates competitive advantage. Okay, so when it comes to all of this, you've got primary activities at the very bottom. And those primary activities are things that go directly into the creation of a product or an execution of a service. So whether that is your receiving and your warehousing, your inventory management, if you have a physical product, it's got all, and if I were to take this into a service piece of it, you're still going to have all of the inbound of other pieces to support the service, but you have a ton of operations that's going on. And that, okay, so let's look at it from a manufacturing, because otherwise it's going to get too confusing if I keep bouncing back and forth. Let's look at it strictly from a product perspective. You've got all of your inventory and all the pieces, maybe all the pieces that you're working with coming in. You've got inventory that you have to manage. You've got operations that are putting all of these pieces together, maybe boxing them all up. And then you've got your outbound logistics, which is taking care of all of your boxing, shipping, and everything. You've got your marketing and sales, your marketing plan, all of that, as well as coming up with your pricing. Then you've got all your after sales services. All those pieces are all product related, right? So now you've got to go into, well, how can you help the primary activities become more efficient? It's those secondary activities. So procurement can help identify maybe some of those materials that could be sourced either faster or cheaper, right? Or if you are running behind schedule with one vendor, you can find the second vendor to be able to supply that material, excuse me. So services, whatever, procurement can help you. So I'm going to take a pause and say, I don't know for a lot of you guys, but sometimes you feel like procurement is just slowing you down and it's a bunch of bureaucracy. Well, that also means that the secondary activities that can go on sometimes get unwieldy, and that needs to be addressed because that affects the competitive advantage that a company has. If they cannot efficiently and effectively do what they need to do, then they are not adding value to the company. I'm going to stay off my soapbox, but that's one of those pieces. From a technological development perspective, doesn't matter if it is for a product or whatever, you've got all of your pieces of product R&D, you've got your design, your market research, all of those different pieces that go into how you create what you create. Well, that's that area. So how can they become more efficient? Is it the people that you've got? Maybe you need different skill sets. Maybe they spend way too much in nitpicking a certain area. Do they really need to go that route? Are they not being very efficient? And so it's increasing the repair and the customer service efforts. So the R&D and the product design people need to get more on their game to reduce the cost of the primary activity of after sales service. So you see how they all play together, right? So now you've got your human resource management, which we all know about that sometimes it can work and sometimes it doesn't work as well. And then the infrastructure of the company as a whole, which can be so much more than just the overhead and the management, but it's also typically going to include your technology pieces and any kind of building structure, infrastructure that you have. So all those pieces. So when you take your sales and you subtract the cost of all of those activities going on, that leaves you with a margin, right? So the value that's being created comes from based on how good is the margin to the company. If you can reduce the cost that is going into that product or that service that you're selling, you increase the value of the company and the competitive advantage. So there are so many ways that you can, so I talked about cost reduction in these areas. The other way that you can do it is if like your technological development, can they differentiate your product better than your competitors? Is there a tweak that you can make? And marketing and sales really market the product better? All those different types. Oops, sorry. So all of that goes into this piece, which is the strategic management process. Okay, so we talked about mission, vision, values. Then you've got the strategic plan that's driving the whole company. Well, then you've got within that circle, you've got the annual plan that we talked about. And so every year you need to go and create your annual plan. You need to execute on that annual plan. You need to monitor your progress. You need to review your plan. And then you go in and you look out for the next year. Are you going to continue working on some of the same things that you worked on last year? Are there new things? Are you making progress on achieving your strategic goals? That is the biggest question. But the value chain analysis that we just talked about should have inputs into all of this.